Okay, record is on.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the first session, CRID session webinar series of spring 2022, titled Navigating the Developers Landscape. Today we have Amna Bin Thaneya, who started her career at Miras Development, where she worked as an architect and trained as a project manager in the leisure and entertainment department. Together with a team, Amna completed many destination-focused projects in Dubai before she transferred to Dubai Parks and Resorts, where she worked with the design team to deliver a theme park and resort-based development. She was also involved in design process of the chairman's special projects portfolio for the company. Later on, Amna joined MAR as a development manager and architect under joint department with the responsibilities including overseeing and managing master plans and developments from inception up to a customer handover. She worked as for the moment, she's working with Majid Al Futtaim, shifting her focus towards understanding and developing more sustainable communities. Amna is currently a graduate student at the University of Cambridge, earning her master's degree in interdisciplinary design for built environment. She was also chosen alongside 11 Emirati young talents of the team for future years as part of the Prime Minister's office to explore future challenges, as well as to develop proactive solutions for the UAE. This is an introduction about our speaker today, Amna. So I would like to remind you all, thank you for attending, and I would like to remind you all, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section, or just send me a private message and I will direct all of these questions to our speaker at the end of the talk. I think that's all from my side for now, Amna. You can go ahead. We're all looking forward to your talk. Thank you. Just unmute your mic, Amna, so we can hear you as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having a bit of technical issues. Okay. You can hear me, right, everyone?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. As Mohammed mentioned, I'm currently working as a developer manager as part of the community development team. Now, development is quite a complex industry and is often quite misunderstood and generalized as being this field that is only focused on generating revenue and making profit. But this is not true in the case of Dubai and Dubai's urban expansion. Developers are actually the pillars upon which Dubai's foundation and infrastructure development was built. It was actually developers who took Dubai from what it was, a once desert landscape, and turned it into a thriving city, an image of prosperity in just a few years. This is the result of the driven leadership of Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum, who envisioned a better future for the city. And he believed that in order to achieve this vision, a strong foundation must be established to modernize the city. And so he entrusted Dubai's leading merchant families with enough support to develop the city and its infrastructure into the metropolis it is today. These once merchant families still exist to this day as Dubai's most prominent and key developers. It is they who made Dubai what it is today. So as you can see, the city was built on the concept of actually fulfilling a vision of modernity rather than fixating on a concept of simply making profit. But the question remains, what is it exactly do these developers do? Who are they? How do they achieve their vision? How do they work? How do they function? What is their style? It is actually quite difficult to put an exact definition to it because no matter how many Google searches, I apologize, I seem to have technical difficulties.
Amna, your mic is off. Please, if you can switch it on.
Apologies. As I was saying, it is actually quite difficult to put an exact definition to what a developer means. Because no matter how many Google searches you conduct or books you read, it is nearly impossible to place a universal definition to it. But I'll try to explain the basics of what a textbook definition of a developer is through the story of Ahmed. So meet Ahmed, an aspiring developer with the dream of building a beautiful community. Fortunately, Ahmed has recently purchased a piece of land on which he plans to execute his development. Ahmed starts researching some trends in the market, the latest house design, the latest materials, sustainability, and so on, all in an effort to make sure that he delivers a project to the utmost standard and contribute positively to the economy and the urban fabric. He has now completed his project brief. Next, Ahmed hired some architecture consultants and engineers to design his project. Ahmed is actually quite pleased with the design. So he now sends the project out for bids and has contractors on board and is ready to build the project. Months later, his project is complete and he is ready to sell or lease the project to his clients who can now move into the community. He collects a profit on this basis and moves on to developing his next vision. That, in summary, is a basic definition of what a developer is or a development management is. But it is not as simple or as maybe boring as it sounds. And that's why I'll be taking you through my own definition of what it takes to work for a developer, specifically in Dubai. The reason why we have difficulty in having a defined definition of what a developer is because each developer has his own style, or what he calls a business model. So just like Zaha Hadid has different, so just like architects have different styles, like Zaha Hadid with her signature organic structures, or Norman Foster, who is more commercial, but still produces conceptual work, or even Tadao Ando with his signature concrete forms and manipulation of light and space. Just as these architects have their own signature, so do developers. And when you've been in the industry for as long or as little as I have been, you start to be able to differentiate these styles. In the case of developers, it's actually not called a style, but rather a business model. So you have those developers whose business model is in the form of building mega projects and structures and aiming at achieving the tallest, biggest, and grandest of all qualities, just like Emaar. You also have those who focus on destination creation and the art of theming and mastering material selection and creation of urban environments like Miras. Or developers who focus more on the business and functional side of things by creating economically efficient and sustainable machines in the form of shopping malls like Majid Al Futtaim. But there are many and many more in the market. And besides styles or business models, they each have a set of objectives and area of focus, which defines what constitutes a developer in their own individual company mission statements. So in the midst of all of this development sits the development manager like myself, who is the most important person, I would say, that works for a developer and keeps the project going. But again, the question is, what does a development manager do exactly? And what are the requirements needed to work for a developer and succeed in the process? A development manager, in summary, is the keeper of the money or the cost, and the keeper of time, and the keeper of quality, which are basically the three holy pillars or main objectives of any developer. And this is based on universal practice. But how each of these three elements are defined is up to the individual developer. The development manager, in essence, is the person who not only manages the project, but also all the people and all the departments who come together to make the project come to life. whether it's interior design or architecture or MEP engineers, structural engineers, finance, marketing, and the list goes on. It's a very interdisciplinary practice and requires the individual to practice an immense amount of patience and coordination in order to have a successful project. So there's really no textbook guidance to explain what a development manager does, because development managers are in common practice actually defined by the interconnectivity of personal experiences that will shape their unique management style. Well, at least that's my own definition of it. And it's something that I personally discovered through my own experience and journey, and how different aspects of my career and eventually educational journey actually relate to one another and defined what it means to be a development manager from my perspective. Over the years, I had the privilege of working with some of the greatest developers in Dubai, some of which I mentioned earlier, and was able to expand my portfolio on this basis. And as you can see in this image, these dots represent the projects I worked on throughout my career. Actually, not all of them, but only the ones that actually got built on site. So when I think of my experiences and projects, I like to think of them in the form of dots, because to me, a dot is a symbol of a different point in time. Because my mindset was also quite different at different points of my career, despite of how short it actually is. I also had extremely different roles to play in every single project I worked on. In one project, I was an urban planner. In another, I was a project manager. In another, I was an architect. And at one point, I was putting financial figures together. So it was never always the same, even if some of these projects were actually for the same company. But because I'm a development manager, I had different tasks. So naturally, in the beginning of my career, I always felt like these dots were very dispersed, as they are shown in the image, and not connected to each other in any way whatsoever. Because in reality, you get used to having structure in your life when you're still in school. You are told that in order to get an A or a B or a C, you would need to do 1, 2, 3, and the rest is up to you. But it's not quite the same when it comes to your career, and you end up having to figure out or navigate your way through it. And in the beginning, that always made me feel lost and confused. And most of the time, I had no clue what I was doing or how to focus my career in a specific path in order to become a development manager. But over time, you realize that this was, of course, an incorrect mindset, because there's no such thing as dispersed experiences. Everything you ultimately do or learn, no matter how insignificant it may seem at first, would soon reveal itself as being a critical aspect of your experience. And I actually, I once stumbled upon the speech that Steve Jobs gave at the Stanford commencement address in 2005, where he actually had a theory about connecting the dots. And he lived by this theory in the course of his successful career. In his speech, he explains that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, in your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. And I wanted to show you how I managed to connect these dots that took me from here, which is my thesis project in university, to here, which is where I am currently at in my career, and how that essentially made me the development manager I am today. Especially considering that as a young architect graduating from AUD, the world seemed like it was filled with endless opportunities for an aspiring young architect. But my actual glimpse into the real world started a while before graduating, when I did my internship at an architecture consultancy. And this is where I first began to understand what a client-designer relationship is all about, and had my initial understanding of how the development industry works. Up until that point, I was living in somewhat of a design bubble. And inside this bubble, living with me were the greats from Zaha Hadid to Ram Koolhaas, Norman Foster, you name it. I was completely oblivious to my surroundings and what was happening in the outside world, outside of this bubble. I drew the circle around the world of design and I lived in it because this is what I love doing and I love designing and I did not want to learn about anything else. But after my 4th year, in the summer of 2013 specifically, we were asked to do our internships for some course credit for university. And I happened to do mine at this architecture consultancy, like I mentioned. So at this consultancy, we as architects, as you know, would come up with design solutions and projects for real clients. And we were specifically focusing on villa design at the time. And this is where I caught my first glimpse of what it was like to answer to a client. And this time, the client was not my design professor, but a member of the general public who didn't know much about design. And it's from this particular experience that I learned a very important lesson, which is clients or end users, as we call them in the industry, are not interested in what my version of what a nice villa looks like with the cantilevers and the angles and the corners that would cost them millions, but rather prefer simple spaces that are comfortable, easy to navigate, nicely designed rooms, bathrooms, spaces that feel homey, and most importantly, and the magic keyword is fits within their budget, but also looks good in the same time. Now, mind you, at the time, as an intern, I had no idea what a good budget was. But on the plus side, I did learn about comfortable bedroom sizes and bathrooms and all of that. And with the help of my mentor, I learned my first lesson in the real world, which helped me navigate my way through the developer world in the future, which is you need to find creativity within the confinements of minimalism, which is an extremely difficult task to achieve because you somehow have to let go of what your perspective is because you're not going to be living in this villa and start thinking of people who will actually occupy the space. And this became my first official dot, which kickstarted my journey, my internship. But sadly, as soon as the internship ended, I stashed this experience away and eventually came back to it years later. But I found myself yet again in my safe space, the bubble, as I ventured on into my thesis year. I take a very great pride in my thesis project. I consider it honestly till this day, one of my utmost and important achievements. And I'll tell you why. I've heard some discouraging comments and jokes posted on social media and other platforms where it is assumed that if you're a fresh graduate, you will not be hired for jobs unless you are magically in possession of freehand experience. But this is not true in the case of architecture students or any students for that matter, because your internship experiences, your university projects are very critical for you to enter into the work field. So take my thesis, for example. I'll just explain the concept of my thesis basically and briefly to you because it's a very critical aspect of how I actually started my career. So this is the final render or poster with the elevations in the sections. And I've attended many of your recent panels and understand that you guys are more technically advanced than we were 8 years ago when it comes to renders and all of that. But I'm proud of my project. My thesis project typology is an animation studio tower. I chose animation because I have a great deal of interest in the art of animation and was inspired by the movement of different frozen frames used to create an animation sequence or movement. I don't know if you can see it clearly from the screen, but basically this sequence of movement defined the form of the building. And despite it not being very realistic, because what I know today that I didn't know back then, that as a developer, this would cost you billions. But despite that, the creativity that went into it, and because it was in relation to animation, and because I spoke with great passion every time I explained this project, I had the privilege to land my first ever job with a company called Miras Holding, who happens to be a developer. And now I did not know much about developers at that time, nor any aspect of what they do. So I entered as I did with the mindset of an architect, simply put. And during the interview process, I was not initially confident because I thought, well, this interviewer may not take me so seriously, having a 20-something-year-old graduate talk about animation and cartoons and all of that, but I persevered with my passion, and they were intrigued. And to my surprise, during the interview, I was asked if I would be interested in joining the entertainment and theme park development department. And I said, yes, of course, it's actually a dream come true. And what are the chances? And I found it really strange and coincidental how my thesis project was actually connected to how I kickstarted my career working for Miras in entertainment. So all that effort I put into researching about cartoons and animation was actually put into good use in the field, working for this entertainment department. So here is how I start connecting my dots. And here's a look of how my thesis project, which is my second dot, is connected to my first job, which consists of a number of dots, each of which represents a different project I was involved in, like Hub Zero and Green Planet and City Walk, some parts of La Mer, entertainment portions of Box Park, entertainment portions of Blue Waters. But it wasn't quite as straightforward as I would have imagined upon entering into Miras. Because when I first joined, I was actually considered a junior officer and was working as part of the project management team, not design. And this was basically, honestly, my expression of fear when I was told that I would be a project manager, because I didn't know what that was. It was just a fear of lack of knowledge rather than fear of the thing itself. And so I didn't know what that was besides what I learned about it in the basics, mind you. But you can sense how anxious I could be having done 5 years of architecture design studio and not 5 years of project management studio, if that even exists. But what I've come to learn though, was that a project manager is actually very critical in the development process and whose main focus area or scope of work was to deliver a project mainly in terms of monitoring construction on site. And I frankly had no idea what I was doing at the time. I had to learn everything myself. But I had amazing managers who were always ready to take my questions, and this is how you succeed. I know it's a very simple and maybe an insignificant advice that I can give, but this is how you succeed, by asking questions and not staying in your bubble. And my first boss consistently used to remind me that there's no such thing as a stupid question. So as an officer working as a project manager, design was part of the work, but it wasn't the whole deal. It was probably 10% of my job at the time. So I had to learn what it means to be on site, what it's like to meet with contractors or sit in progress meetings. I would look at these delivery dates and budgets and numbers, and you look at basically everything. You look after everything from making sure the facade of the building is built correctly and down to even making sure furniture is delivered to the building on time. For example, when developing City Walk, I was part of the team that worked on Hub Zero and Green Planet, both in City Walk. And one of my tasks was to procure the furniture they needed for the back of house offices. And my first question upon stumbling upon this task was, what do you mean by the word procure? I don't understand. And they told me basically you need to buy the furniture into the offices of Green Planet and Hub Zero, simple as that. And again, I was confused. Okay, but how do I do this? Are you going to give me a credit card and I will go shopping, or how does this work exactly? They said no, but there's something called a procurement department, and you need to coordinate with them to get the furniture and try to work out a budget. And honestly speaking, it took me longer to understand what procurement was than it did to get the furniture to be delivered to the project. But at least at the end of the day, I didn't say no to a task, and I learned what procurement was, and I learned how to coordinate with people and start to get out of this bubble and out of my comfort zone and start coordinating with people outside of my department. I had the same experience when I worked on the outlet village in Jabal Ali. So The outfit village, which was actually inspired by an Italian village of San Gimignano in Italy, as shown on the right side. I was entrusted with the task to make sure that the project is complete on time and to make sure that the final facade matches the approved renders, and to make sure that it looks exactly like an Italian village in terms of all the look and the feel and the materials and the lighting and everything. So my question yet again was, yes, I can do that, but how? What? Who do I speak to? And this is where I learned a very painful lesson about managing projects for developers, is that developers have teams and teams of hundreds of people working on the same project. And you need to, at some point, speak to all of them and make sure that everything is moving smoothly, everyone is aligned, and it is your responsibility as a project manager to see this through. At this point, again, I was very anxious and had something called imposter syndrome, which is basically feeling like you are, maybe you don't belong in the right place. But please remember that this feeling came to me only a month after graduating and being thrown all these different tasks that I never knew how to work with before. So as much as I felt privileged that I was learning all this new information, I was afraid that I would end up somehow failing or doing something wrong, because it's no longer a matter of something on paper. This is actually projects getting built, and it's someone's money being entrusted onto me to make sure that not a single dirham gets wasted. But fortunately, the developer industry is an industry that is very acceptable. They accept mistakes as long as you don't repeat this mistake. And the idea is to basically learn, take risks, and move on. But I kept thinking to myself, is this what developers do? Do they spend their days mostly designing on Excel sheets and making sure things are delivered on time? Or is there actually more depth into it? And it was at this point where Miras decided to transfer some of the team members to Dubai Parks and Resorts, which is the daughter company of Miras, which was quite exciting, because imagine being at a theme park every single day. So when I was transferred, I became an assistant manager and was working with a completely different team and a completely different set of people, and basically felt like I had started all over again. But at the same time, I was still looking forward to learning new skills from a new group of people. So besides the task of getting the theme parks of Dubai Parks and Resorts to its current state through site visits and usual project management tasks, I was also, this time my task was a bit different. It was more design related, which was great because I was going back to my roots in a way, except that although I had some architecture work to do, I also had to work with a lot of master plans, which isn't my strength. I understand, yes, we learned it in university, but it was never part of my plan, if that makes sense, because I thought that my career would be more focused on architecture design. But after extensively researching, I learned that master planning as a discipline is also a core aspect for developers, since developers are the ones responsible for urban expansion in the city. So I gave it a chance, and I struggled, to say the least. I didn't know the width of the road or the appropriate size of a plot. I only knew how to draw. So this benefited me to a certain extent, but I persevered, and together with the studio was able to work on multiple projects for the company, most of which are actually master plans. And I spent hours and hours and hours in front of Google Earth measuring roads, measuring plots, drawing lines on CAD until I got the hang of it and discovered that I actually loved master planning, and it was not as scary as I made it out to be. And just like that, a new interest was born. And once Dubai Parks and Resorts was complete, we had the opportunity to transfer to yet another sister company in Miras, which is North 25. So in North 25, I was still working on master planning, which was a huge relief. But our projects now consisted more of residential projects. And quite frankly, after working on malls and theme parks and retail and growing to become an expert in that field, I was not looking into working into residential projects at all. My focus was completely shifted into commercial and entertainment, and I completely disregarded other typologies. But I was getting anxious at this point again, because at some point I was managing numbers, at other points, dates and construction. Sometimes I'm doing master planning, sometimes I'm doing residential. So I just felt at that point, like my experience was still very dispersed and my dots were still not connecting as I hoped that they would be at that point in time. And it's funny how things work, but it is at this point that I started my new adventure at EMAR, where I finally became a development manager. And EMAR was quite popular, as you know, when it comes to residential projects. And although I feared residential because I was worried that I would end up doing, you know, cookie cutter projects where you design one thing and just copy it everywhere. But after, you know, thinking about it and doing my research, I understood that development and developers in Dubai are businessmen. So they will develop a product that people need at the current time. So I told myself, Dubai is not going to need another theme park. It's not going to need much more retail with all your online shopping and all these new shopping trends that are appearing. People need communities, people need homes. And this is something where I should be focusing on if I truly want to become a better development manager and improve developers in Dubai. And that's what I did. Not only did I work on residential projects, but I actually ended up specializing in it, despite my fears. And what is funny is that my interview at EMAR opened my eyes to back to the connected dot system, because up until that point, as I mentioned, I was just doing master plans in retail and entertainment. So I have no background in residential whatsoever in the field. So in the interview, I get asked, what is the appropriate size of a bedroom and what is the appropriate size of a bathroom for a villa? And this is where I froze and panicked. But then I remembered I actually worked on a bedroom and a bathroom and a residential villa in my internship years and years and years ago. So I got excited because my dots were starting to connect again. And I was able to make my second connection relying on knowledge that I acquired, but I actually stashed away hundreds of years ago. But used it to answer all these interview questions, which gave me this wonderful insight and wonderful opportunity to work for this giant developer, and subsequently use the same knowledge to do all my projects moving forward. And I think this is where I learned the real core values of what it means to work for a developer, because funny enough, the job requirement is to understand project management, which I didn't at first, is to do master planning, which I didn't want to do at first, but I learned it through practice, understand working with numbers, understand managing people, going to site, understanding how to execute not only residential projects, but multiple typologies, and so on and so forth. And suddenly the dots started to connect a little more than they have done so before. And things finally started to make sense. And I started to make more sense of what developers are and how they function. In EMAR, I worked on multiple projects and master plans like EMAR South, which the community in Dubai South, and this taught me the value of how to build communities for customers and think from their perspective, because it's your responsibility as a developer to always think and put the customer first. It also taught me the value of a dirham and how to work with finance and financial figures in more detail. Mina Rashid, one of the second developments I worked on, is different and more on the luxury side, as you can see. But it taught me the value of time and the importance of marketing a project and how to work with marketing. I actually had no idea the trouble that goes into marketing any project. And after working endless hours on Mina Rashid, I think I can work in the marketing department if I wanted to. And it also taught me of how to work with authorities like Dubai municipality and what their involvement with the project, with our projects are. So it's not just your internal stakeholders, you're also working with external stakeholders and all these different departments and components that come together to make a project come to life. It also taught me the importance of studying market trends and being creative in creating a vision and writing your own briefs. And most importantly, I think Mina Rashid taught me an important lesson in how to be resilient in the face of uncertainty like COVID, because as you all know, COVID was very disruptive and disrupted construction progress across all of Dubai. And how it's the developer's responsibility to reframe the way we build this, to respond to things like pandemics. But this is a completely different topic that we can leave for another day. And I also worked on beachfront in Marina, which taught me how to build towers and the importance of understanding or having a very basic understanding, at least, about structures and MEP in terms of verticality, because that shapes you as a designer and shapes you as a development manager. All my projects taught me a bit of everything from different disciplines and different fields. And I know that it may seem a lot for one person to take in, and some of you may even think, okay, if I wanted to work with numbers, I could have gotten a degree in finance. Or for management, I could have gotten a degree in business, but this is honestly the wrong attitude, because even if you don't want to become a development manager, but an architect, it is important to learn every aspect of the craft. So you don't really need to go into the details and calculations of these things. Development manager at the end of the day is first and foremost a designer and an architect of the future. And it's a very powerful skill to have. In the beginning, when I was anxious and a bit overwhelmed, I used to believe that I should know everything, but you simply cannot. But it's critical to know a little bit of everything because it makes you stronger as a designer. And have you ever heard the term jack of all trades, master of none? I used to think that this was actually an insult until I stumbled upon the complete phrase, which reads, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one, which is actually a compliment, and that a person is actually versatile and adept to many things, just like a development manager and a developer should be. My adventure doesn't stop as a development manager. I'm always motivated to keep moving forward and to hop onto the next critical trends. My current focus is going to be on sustainability and net zero, but I'll leave this talk for another day once I've had enough experience and enough stories to share. So now back to my initial question about what is a development manager, based on me navigating my way through the developer's landscape. And basically a development manager is someone who is a student and an intern who dreams big, but within the limit of reality. What I learned in Miras is that it's someone who understands how to work with numbers, someone who knows how to be the keeper of time and budget, and someone who's not afraid to get their hard helmet on and their hands dirty in the field. It is someone who has a designer mindset and is also a trendsetter and understands the value of space. And what I learned in Dubai Parks is that a development manager is also a master planner. As you know, developers contribute to the urban fabric of Dubai because they are master planners. And what I learned in EMAR is that a development manager and a developer is someone who is agile and resilient in the face of challenges. It's someone who's a problem solver, who works efficiently within a team, who's always researching and has an outlook for the future and has the bravery to get out of their comfort zone. Someone who's expanding their knowledge with all these new trends that are emerging, and someone who isn't afraid to take on this huge responsibility, because it is a heavy responsibility, but the end result is always fulfilling. And just like that, that is what developers do and what a development manager does. And just like Steve Jobs said, your experience shape who you are if you practice patience, proactiveness, and continuous learning. You'll find that eventually and unexpectedly, your experiences will connect together and make you a very strong asset in your field. And you guys, as architecture students or architects of tomorrow, are actually the pillars that will essentially guide developers on what the world is up to and how we can essentially improve and have a better future and better society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amna, for the interesting topic. It's very interesting to have two-sided experience, one towards architecture and towards maybe clients, I'd say, or developers. Maybe the question is a very obvious question. I would say it's very hard to have an architecture background and focus on the design ideas and maybe part of sustainability. And then on the other side, you have a developer who looks into numbers, as you mentioned, and looks into budgets. So where do you find the balance between inserting all of these interesting architecture ideas at the same time minding the budget of a client? Because clients are all maybe they are only looking towards numbers at the end of the day and the budgets. So as an architect, which is an interesting to have these two-sided experience. So as an architect, how do you guarantee that, ensuring the quality of the delivered projects at the same time to satisfy the budget of the developer? Do you think it's a hard thing to do? Oh, I think so, but how do you manage to do that?
It's a very difficult thing. It's quite tricky because it's even more tricky when there's like a gap in the communication, because you have the architect communicating something and the developer communicating something else. But I think the interesting part, or the way to take this forward, is to finding a middle ground, something that satisfies both parties, and it's been done before. And the way to do that is that you have to be brave enough to actually stand up against developers and tell them that, no, we think we have a better way of doing things because we have the research to prove this. And this intrigues developers because they will listen to you if you come to them with facts and figures. But if you simply come and just defend your answers without any background to it, or without having a strong foundation to defend it, you wouldn't be able to change their mind. But it's not impossible to change their mind about numbers and figures.
Yeah, interesting. And also taking it from your last paragraph that you mentioned about zero net and energy and sustainability. Do you think, of course, it's a crucial topic and it's very critical these days, but do you think we need to start a campaign? I mean, because this falls into my also research interest. Do you think there's a campaign needed to educate developers in general about the danger of climate change and the importance of shifting towards sustainability? Are you working on that, or you are going to use maybe other ways of approaching their knowledge?
The last developers I worked with did not have, I would say, the knowledge when it comes to sustainability and net zero. It's quite new to the industry, even if it's not a new topic, like it's existed for decades, but it's a new topic for developers in Dubai. But with Expo and everything, I think people are more educated about it. And there was a pledge that was done recently that we will become, I'm not sure if it's net zero, forgive me, or net carbon by 2050. So that's something that if you put a vision out there, developers will have the more encouragement to actually work towards achieving that vision. So it's just a matter of having a common vision, but I do agree we need a campaign just to accelerate things, because what people are doing right now is that they have a basic checklist that comes from Dubai municipality that gives you the bare minimum of what you need to do to have a sustainable building, and that's about it. No one will try to take it the extra mile. But there's developers like Majid Al Futtaim who advocates for net zero and advocates for sustainability and having more sustainable communities. So it is starting to emerge, but I think we're still behind as an industry when it comes to sustainability and net zero.
And I think my advice would be also within, if this campaign is about to start, is to target the efficiency of these buildings, and then it all shape and I mean the final result is saving money in terms of energy use and in terms of even building envelope and performance of the building, because this is, you have to target them on what they like to hear, and I think that's a good thing. And I really hope that we will get to that point in Dubai. other question is, do you think as what's the main point or the main highlight that you would like our students or our visitors from outside to take away from this presentation today?
The main highlight is, like I mentioned in the presentation, I don't want people to remain in a bubble. And because getting out of this bubble and trying to learn from different disciplines actually benefits you as not just as an architect or a designer, as a manager in any field, not just specifically architecture and design. So my utmost advice is to always branch out, always do research, always look into the latest trends, always defend your ideas. It's very important. People actually do listen these days, especially when it comes to trends. And if you do enough research into it, people will implement your ideas and bring it to life. So don't stay in your bubble, don't stay in your comfort zone, come out of it, share your ideas and be brave.
That's interesting. And I think the first question where you answered the importance of having, I mean, the architecture background as along with all of this experience that you gained, because this is something that you are not born with. Getting all of these experiences is something, and I think that you have a message from our team. I'm very proud of you, Dr. Nabil, sending you a message. I think that was very interesting, and I think we need to get you on board one more time, especially with knowing how it's going with the I mean, taking it towards sustainability and sustainable communities later on, because the whole world is shifting towards that. It's not the future anymore. We're talking about the present now. This is something I have to do right now. It's not the future anymore. I think that would be it from my side. That was an interesting. Thank you, Amna, for coming in, and thanks for the talk.
I would like just to say one thing, if I may, please, Muhannad.
Sure, yeah.
So first, Amna, thank you so much. And I have to tell you, the presentation and your journey is very insightful. And I'm sure everyone who's here really benefited from that. And imagine, Amna, this is only your first 10 years. So I can see the wonders that will happen in the coming future coming from you, and knowing you and knowing how you know, how serious and how hardworking you are and creative. And you just didn't mention, and this is something I will mention, about your project, which was an award-winning project. your senior project is an award-winning project, and I would like to highlight that on. And I'm very happy to hear that it also helped you, you know, to shape and help you in getting where you are now. And I'm sure the future is bright for you. So onward and upward. And thank you again for being here and talking and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you, again. Thank you, everyone who joined in today. And I think that's it for today. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next session.